top free agents be, or their top free agent target should be, and is Draymond Green actually a contender to sign with the Detroit Pistons? We'll talk about that with a special guest today in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Later on, with our special guest today, we're going to talk about what the Pistons should do with Bojan Bogdanovic in this offseason. Should he just stay on the roster, or is there or potentially a different route they could take with that? And then also I want to get some thoughts on the Pistons have a few older guys playing in Summer League. I just want to get our guest's thought on overall older younger guys, I should say, playing in the Summer League. What are their thoughts on that? But first, we're going to start off with who should be the Pistons' top targets in free agency, and is Draymond Green actually someone they could go after? And our special guest today is Howard Beck, contributor to GQSports and the Locked On Network. Past, he was with Sports Illustrated, now Bleacher Report, New York Times, and the LA Daily News. If you guys have been listening to the podcast for a while, you'll know that Howard had joined us earlier in the offseason. So I definitely thank you for coming on a second time and taking time out of your day to talk with us, Howard. So Pistons have around $30 million in cap space this offseason. It's what they're projected to have. They just picked up the options on Alec Burks and Isaiah Livers yesterday. We're recording this on the 28th. So yesterday, they just picked up both of their options, and they're still going to be left with around $30 million in cap space is what projected. And obviously, if they really wanted to make more cap space, they can. There's other ways they can do it, but that's what they're projected to have. This isn't I want to say this is a very strong free agency class, but there's some guys out there that could help. Who do you believe should be at the top of the Pistons free agency target list?
Good to see you again, Koo. I mean, so you had asked the question kind of rhetorically, or maybe actually, about Draymond Green. So I'll start there. I don't think Draymond's leaving the Warriors. I've never thought that he was leaving the Warriors, even at some of the low points for him and or them this season. And I think that when they traded Jordan Poole, there are 50 different reasons the Warriors traded Jordan Poole, including his contract, including performance compared to his contract and everything else, and just the urgency to win now. But also, yes, certainly the Draymond Green Jordan Poole clash was at least a part of this. And once you've unloaded Jordan Poole, you have removed one of your major chemistry concerns, if that were still lingering. And it does just seem like every indication from the Bay Area is that the Warriors' absolute intent is keeping it all together. Bob Myers, the GM, of course, stepped aside, and Mike Dunleavy Jr. is now running the show, but Steve Kerr still on board. Steph, Clay, and I think Draymond too. They're going to try to see how much further they can push this thing. And so I think it would take a lot to extract Draymond from there. There's been speculation about the Sacramento Kings right up the road because Mike Brown, former Warriors assistant coach, of course, running the show there, and they cleared cap room on draft night or extra room. Like all of those conversations are interesting, and obviously Draymond's got some ties, to Michigan. So like, there's a natural kind of curiosity there. And just to be clear, like if Draymond were like, if the Warriors had basically made it clear, like either the run is done or we think we need to seriously restructure around Steph to make one last push, but with a different group, then and if it were clear that Draymond were on the move, then I think we could have a serious discussion about what he could do for the Pistons or for a lot of teams, right? Like I think Draymond could be a really valuable piece to a lot of teams, especially young teams that are trying to figure out how to win, that need a defensive backbone and a conscience and a locker room leader. I'm a huge Draymond fan just in terms of what he brings to a team. So I would advocate for the Pistons to chase him if I thought he were actually available. I just don't think he is. So this is not a great free agent class, period. And the best names or the marquee names are probably all staying put. And they wouldn't be guys who necessarily would be Pistons targets anyway, right? Like they were never going to be the ones chasing James Harden or Kyrie Irving. It's more the second and third tier guys that you're shopping for now. And part of this depends on how do the Pistons view themselves going into this coming season. Is it time to turn the corner? How much do you want to turn the corner? Are you still kind of doing more of a methodical build around your young guys? Do you just want veterans to come in and help support them, lead them, mentor them? Or are you looking for impact veterans who are going to help you start winning a lot as well as doing those other kind of more of intangible things? And I don't know what the answer to that necessarily is. I was just looking this up, and I think I looked this up in a related, in a different version the last time you and I talked, Koo. But like, um, now that like Sacramento's ended their playoff drought, I started looking at, all right, forget playoff drought. When was the last time teams won a playoff series?
Oh no.
It's okay because the Pistons are not the top of the list. It's actually still the Kings and the Timberwolves. They are tied for longest playoff series win drought. Last time the Kings or Timberwolves won a playoff series was 2004. That's a long time. But the Pistons are second. I'm sorry. 2008 before Orlando, 2010, Indiana, 2014.
If you went playoff win, we'd probably be Pistons probably at the top.
Yeah. So I was looking at series win. Like, when's the last time a team made the second round?
Right.
So it's been a long time. And I've said this about the Kings before last season's breakthrough. It's not the current administration's burden to bear, right? It's not the current players' burden to bear, the current coach, like every single one of these long droughts with any of these franchises, it's wave after wave of GMs and coaches and players. But there is at some point kind of a psychic weight there because the fan base did live through it all, right? Like, it's not Troy Weaver's burden to bear. It's not Monty Williams' burden to bear. It's not Cade Cunningham's burden to bear. But you all, as Pistons fans, are sitting there going, yeah, guys, it's been 15 years since we won a playoff series. So I just wonder how much that plays into how much they want to press the pedal down right now. If you've got a weaker free agent class, which we do, I don't think you go full pedal down at this stage. You've got a lot of young players, and including one really important one in Cunningham, who just missed almost an entire season. And you need to see what their trajectory is before you really have a clear picture of what you need around them. So I think you're more dabbling around the edges and being opportunistic. That said, like, the guys that leap out immediately to me, Harrison Barnes, I know has been speculated on. Veteran, smart, leader, does a lot of things, brings a lot of things to the table. He's not a guy you're building around. He's not changing your trajectory by himself, but could he help kind of solidify the front court defense? Some versatility, certainly a great leader to have around. I think Barnes is good there. I don't view Kuzma in that same way, but again, local ties and certainly defensive versatility. I worry that Kuzma thinks he's a little bit more of an offensive player than he is. Like, I think Kuzma, some people around the league have told me, like, he kind of sees himself as like a top option. And I'm like, yeah, you should be like a third or fourth offensive option, but an opportunistic scorer and put up big numbers in Washington last year. I could see Grant Williams there. There's been talk of the Jeremy Grant reunion. That could make some sense. If they really wanted to make a splash, you could do the Cam Johnson thing, right? But I just don't think that any team that's chasing Cam Johnson, I think they all have to keep in mind that he's not just a restricted free agent, but that the Nets have all the incentive in the world to match, right? They traded Kevin Durant for Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and all the other stuff, mostly picks. And I just think that once you've done that, like, you can't afford to just let a really important part of that trade just walk. And I think I think the Nets will do even if we have to overpay him, even if we have to match a contract, if it's an offer sheet situation and they have to match it, you can always trade him later, right? Like, I think they'll be willing to overpay. So I don't see Cam Johnson as a realistic target. And then there's some lower, tier guys like a Rui Hachimura, Matisse Thybulle, maybe Yuta Watanabe. Like, there's good guys who are just like good, solid role players who are younger vets who could stabilize some of their perimeter D, and just kind of help fill out the rotation.
So there's a lot you said there that I want to comment on, but the first thing is I'm glad that you bring up the whole how long it's been since a playoff series win, because it does feel like 100% the fan base is getting sick of it. Like the 100%, it's getting rowdy. Like there's a very loud, I'd say majority of the fan base that's getting pretty rowdy about this.
Mm.
But and we're probably going to talk about this later on when we talk about Bojan as well. It seems like there's like a disconnection right now, at least from what I believe and what I've heard and listening to fans, and from what I know, the insight I do have, is I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect about where the Pistons are and where fans want them to actually go to and where they actually think they are at right now. So I agree with you. I don't think, along with this free agency class not being that great, I don't think this is the free agency class that they should be going out there and just splurging and thinking this is our off season, this is where we take it, and this is our team for the next 5 years. We're pushing it. Like they're not there yet. You brought up a bunch of good points about Cade being out first. You have to see how he looks when he comes back. How does he fit with everybody? What did they need? I think it's clear that they need some wings and some wing defense. Their wing room last year was I think is the worst in the entire NBA. So they need to improve that. But I do think it's incredibly likely that Cam Johnson has been the hot name in the Pistons community. I would love Cam Johnson, but restricted free agency, like you said, it's going to be tough. The new CBA that kicks in does help the Pistons because it is only 24 hours that they'll be waiting instead of, what was it, like the 48, 72 hours before, where you can kind of get like.
It was like and a while back, it was like, I think it was like a full like week.
Yeah,
once
it
upon
was.
a time.
Yeah.
It was like they keep every CBA, the union gets them to shorten it a little bit more. But yeah, it used to be like, all right, go ahead, do the offer sheet thing. You're going to be tied up for days. And
Right.
it was real disincentive for teams to even do that, which meant restricted free agency wasn't even really free agency. So I don't blame the union for wanting that shorter.
For real. And like I said before, they could just, like, if a team was really mad at a team for really raising the price, they'd be like, okay, we're just going to hold you out. We're just going to hold you through this whole time, and then we'll match. And now you're like screwed throughout free
Yeah.
agency. They can't really do that now, but I still think the Nets, like you said, will match probably almost anything because of the reasons you mentioned. I would love Cam still. If there's some way they could do it, I'd love Cam. I do think that the more realistic options, especially, I believe I saw a report that says maybe the Kings are interested in Kuzma. If they were to go get Kuzma, maybe now they don't need Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes could come to Detroit. He would help. But you've mentioned some lower key guys as well that I think the Pistons, if they do whiff on free agency, their top guys, I think the two next best options are to either take on a bad contract and get some assets to fill up your cap space this offseason. I think that would probably be my first thing to pivot to. I've brought up, we call him the boogeyman around the Pistons community, because anytime I mention his name, Pistons fans go crazy. But like Ben Simmons, if the Nets are really that anxious and just like really want to get off him that bad, take his contract and get an asset if you can. But if not, something like that, next guys are like a Grant Williams type. Maybe like you mentioned, Yuta Watanabe, we mentioned on the podcast, maybe a Kelly Oubre, like those type of guys, and maybe get like 2-year deals with like a team option on the back, front loaded in the first year, and then move into next offseason with some more flexibility in cap as well. So there's some different routes the Pistons could take. But yeah, it's not a great free agency class. And I know Pistons fans are going to hold on to Jeremy Grant potentially coming back to Detroit. But as long as Dame's there and they're trying to build, I really don't see him leaving Portland. I don't see that happening at all. So
I can't tell which way that's going yet. I don't think anybody knows for sure. I kind of have this feeling, and I'm going to be doing the Locked On Heat later today as well. And I was just jotting down some notes for that one because, one of the things those guys are wondering about is how long should the Heat wait to see how the Dame thing plays out. And my feeling is like when we get to free agency, 6:00 Eastern time on Friday, if we immediately hear that Jeremy Grant's re-signing, because obviously like this is a tampering league, everybody's already doing these deals way before. But if it's like 6:01 p.m. Eastern and it's Jeremy Grant's re-signing with the Blazers, or alternatively Jeremy Grant's signing with the Pistons, or wherever, Kings somewhere, we'll know a little bit more at that moment, right? Like not definitively, but like if Jeremy Grant is re-signing with the Blazers a minute after free agency opens, I think that indicates that they're doing everything possible to try to keep Dame in the fold. If Jeremy Grant is leaving, it immediately raises your eyebrows like, oh, is this thing coming apart? Because they can't just go out and replace him that easily because of their cap situation. So like, I think we'll get clarity kind of soon on that note. I'm glad, Koo, that you mentioned the other option of cap room, right? People always overlook this. And Troy Weaver comes from the Sam Presti school and the Oklahoma City Thunder approach, which is if you're not prepared to start winning right now, don't use cap room just to go sign a bunch of guys who are just like moving you ahead like an inch or two. Like, what, if they're not changing your trajectory, what's the real point? You can use your cap room to take on other teams' bad contracts and with incentives that come with it. Like, we need your cap, we need your draft picks, or we not, we'll take on your bad contract, but send this other young player that we like with it. There are other ways to use your cap room, and fans don't like it because it feels like you're not actually pushing the ball forward. But even like the Ben Simmons thing, listen, I know Ben Simmons, like you described him as a boogeyman. I feel like a lot of fan bases view him that way now. Like the Blazers fans, like that's just like the most appalling, insulting thing you can say is a trade package for Dame built around Ben Simmons' contract. Here's the thing. Ben Simmons was all NBA a few years ago. He was a transformational player who was the overwhelming favorite, or, like the consensus number one pick, who everybody viewed as along this line of modern day unicorn type players, right? 6'10" with ball handling skills, a 6'10" point guard in the mold of a Magic Johnson type, right? I understand he has broken down physically. There are concerns about just his mental approach. There are all kinds of concerns, and he has had a rough go the last few years. He has 2 years left on that contract. It is not that onerous anymore. If you wanted, as a young team with no real stakes in the immediate term, to take a flyer on Ben Simmons, restoring his he's still in his prime, restoring his all NBA abilities, that's possible. You also, at this stage, you don't have to worry about, well, he's only a point guard. Like at one point, Ben Simmons would do nothing other than that. He's now the backup center for the Nets. That's how he finished the season, as a backup 5. But he's a guy who can play all 5 positions, who can handle the ball, who was talked about as a potential defensive player of the year candidate for a while. If he gets healthy and gets his head on straight, he could be incredibly valued to some team that's buying low on him as a salary dump. That is not the worst way to use your cap flexibility, or not the worst way to use your rebuilding period. It's actually a pretty smart way to use it, is to take a flyer on a guy who you can afford to wait for him to get back to who he was. And if it doesn't work out, 2 years, you're off the deal. I'm guessing a bunch of your listeners are going to start screaming at me on Twitter within seconds after me making that presentation.
Be ready.
But that's the case I would make, and I believe it. Not necessarily just for your team, but any team.
No, yeah, I've mentioned it quite a few times. I'm actually a big fan of it if they were to whiff on their top guys, but we'll see what happens. So I hope all of you guys listening appreciate. We had a very long first segment with no interruptions. I hope you guys all appreciate it. When we come back, we'll talk about what the Pistons should actually do with Bojan Bogdanovic. But before we get to that, I've got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you'll get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. And after all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply at ebaymotors.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Because we had such a great first segment, we're going to trim down the third segment when we talk about Summer League guys. I'm sure it's not as interesting anyways as what we're talking about here, so it doesn't need that much time anyways. But now we're going to move into what should the Pistons do with Bojan Bogdanovic. And again, if you guys are loyal listeners of the podcast, you guys know how I feel about Bojan Bogdanovic, what the Pistons should do here. I believe they should be trying to capitalize on his value. I would have tried to capitalize on his value at the trade deadline this past season. I would have tried to capitalize on his value on draft night, but they foregone both possible scenarios there, which leads me to believe that there's a very good chance he could be on the roster next season still. However, free agency coming up, things can change. All kinds of things can change here. And we've talked about on the podcast the last few episodes with how clunky the roster is for this team. Now, yes, I mentioned this in the last podcast. People outside the Pistons community may look at that and be like, cool, the team just won 17 games. How can a team be clunky? I understand. But there's guys on the team that they want to get minutes to. You got Cade, Ivy, Duran. Then you got Livers, Stu. You got Killian. You got Wiseman, Bagley. There's a bunch of guys that we've been told they'd like to get some minutes. With the draft pick of Asar, with them having $30 million in cap space, Alec Burks as well, who they just picked up an option to. It just seems like there's too many mouths to feed. So a trade needs to happen to clear up some minutes for all these guys while also being able to use your cap space. I think Bojan Bogdanovic is the first name on that list of guys. Okay, is he the guy we trade? So Howard, let me ask you this. What do you think the Pistons should do with Bojan this offseason?
I don't have a strong take on this. I because there's really two warring conventional wisdom threads here that I feel like both have merit. He definitely has a ton of value around the league, right? And he's on a reasonable contract that, what is it? It's the last full year, and then is it an option or
It's partially guaranteed.
It's a partial guarantee.
Yep.
Yeah, I knew there was something with that next year. So it's an easy one for teams to take on. And there are plenty of contending teams or, high level playoff teams, even mid level playoff teams where, Bogdanovic could be, a great fit, and he fits anywhere really. Because of that value, and because the Pistons are young and still in more of a rebuilding phase, or if it's not rebuilding, it's building, whatever it is, they're not ready to win now and contend for a playoff spot now, or even a play-in spot, I don't think. So it makes sense to say, well, he's more valuable somewhere else. Flip him for some assets, flip him for younger players or picks or whatever. And there's merit to that. And I wouldn't be surprised if they pursue that. But the flip side of that is, when you're rebuilding and you've got a lot of youth, like, you have to have at least some veterans. You need to have you need to have players for a number of reasons. One, if your young guys are a little out of control at times, you need to be able to pull them to the bench and settle things down and throw a veteran out there who will stabilize you in those moments, but also to hold the player accountable, right? Look, you're off course here. I need some, but if I've got nothing but other young guys, maybe I don't have the way to hold you accountable. Also, the veterans hold younger players accountable because they're veterans. Like, that's why we talk about veteran savvy and veteran wisdom and all these other things. I don't think it's a great idea to have 1 through 15 all be like 24 and under. And I think having Bogdanovic, having Alec Burks, bringing in a Harrison Barnes or a Grant Williams or whoever it may be, the other value aside from just like, points, rebounds, assists, defense, is like guys who have been around a while and understand what good work habits mean, understand what winning basketball means, and how to establish some consistency, because talent is never enough in this league. So flipping Bogdanovic means you're jettisoning one of your stabilizing type of influences. I think best guess, they keep him. You go into the season with him. They sign a couple other veterans along the way in these coming weeks or these coming days, and you see how it all works out. Are we going to overachieve a little bit? Does it look like we're going to be competitive? Does it look like we actually have a shot at chasing one of the play-in spots? And then by the time you get to the end of December, when everybody's kind of settled in and they're 20-something games in and everybody kind of figures out where you truly are for the season, and if at that point you're like, you know what, this is not the year we're making the big push. We're not jumping up to 25 or 30 or 35 wins. We're not making a run at the playoffs. That's when you start gauging the market, or you not start gauging the market. You'll probably already know, but because teams will already be calling. There'll be teams that come into the season realizing that they need a Bogdanovic type. And so my best guess is you start the season with them, and depending on the trajectory of the early part of the Pistons season, that's when they determine whether or not it's time to trade him with what's essentially, less than a full season left of a fully guaranteed contract, and see what you can get for him then.
So this is just an extremely interesting conversation for me, and it's going to be extremely interesting to see what the Pistons do in like 2 days now, under 48 hours from now, or maybe a little bit over 48 hours from now, what they decide to do in free agency and throughout free agency, what trades they make. Because let me just throw this at you, and this is a conversation that we're all having right now in the Pistons community about how is this, not just the roster, but how is this rotation going to make sense? So it's not perfect. It's not exactly what's going to happen. We don't know, but let me just throw this at you as a
Sure.
reasonable expectation here. So the Pistons have a starting five. Let's just say Cade, Cunningham, Jaden Ivey. Let's say they start Asar Thompson, but he can come off the bench. The main purpose of this is just get like the rotation kind of ideal.
Yeah.
Asar Thompson, Bojan Bogdanovic, and then Jalen Duren. And then coming off the bench, they got Killian Hayes, their draft pick they traded up for in the draft, and Marcus Sasser, Isaiah Livers, Isaiah Stewart, and then James Wiseman. That's a 10-man rotation, and we included that 10-man rotation. You got a future free agent that they're going to sign, not included in this. They got Alec Burks, so they just picked up their option, not included in this. And then you got Marvin Bagley, who I don't think he's really in their plans, but he's being paid $13 million. So that's a guy that'd just be sitting on your bench at that point. So I know I made like a kind of like a 10-man rotation, but there's 13 guys right there that at least figured or hypothetically you would like to, some mouths to feed there. So, and then also it's just a bunch of other lineup, making lineups make sense stuff, but we don't need to get onto that. The thing with me is, and I'd like to hear where you stand with this, what you think about this, but my thing is I completely agree about what he provides as a veteran presence, and that you need that on a team. Definitely. I don't want to, I hope they're not listening to the podcast because every time they do, they destroy me. But Houston Rockets fans, don't go too crazy on this, okay? But the Houston Rockets have been talked about how last season went in the culture in the locker room, and it wasn't exactly amazing. So, and they need some vets over there, which is what they're trying to do. So I completely understand you don't want to have a completely young team. You don't want to have that. However, if you need to clear up some space for guys like I mentioned, and you got Bojan there and you got Alec Burks there with $30 million in cap space, do you think it's feasible to trade Bojan or Burks or Bojan? I think the idea that we've been using a lot has been Bojan packaged with Bagley to get off his contract, or Burks packaged with Bagley to get off his contract. Like that's been the combination we've been talking about a lot. If they were to use one of those, is it feasible to believe, okay, you're giving that guy up, you want to get some veteran leadership, but with this $30 million in cap space, we can then just replace these guys with someone of that kind of caliber and like kind of swap out two guys for one to kind of make more sense with the roster, with the rotation, and also still keep some of that veteran leadership. If they wanted to go after, like you mentioned, Harrison Barnes, or I know Grant Williams isn't like 30 or anything, but he's been on contending teams. He knows the way around the block. Like bring him in, he can stabilize the locker room. Like, is that feasible to do? Or do you think just holding on, like you mentioned, holding on to these guys like Bojan and seeing how the season goes and flipping them at potentially the deadline is still a better option than that?
If you're trading your veterans, you're immediately looking for other guys to do what they were doing. Like you need other guys to soak up minutes and to be, again, a stabilizing influence and to kind of counterbalance all the youth. You're just going to look for another Alec Burks or Bojan Bogdanovic. And it's not like those guys are on unreasonable contracts. Bagley's deal isn't, like Bagley's deal isn't terrible from just a number standpoint. It's not like, killing their cap or anything. Is he a player who looks like may never quite, be the contributor that you wanted, and so you're stuck with him for 2 more years? Like, yeah, maybe, but like it's not. He's making 12 and a half. Like it's not preventing you from going anywhere. I also don't know that, by the way, like combining Bagley with one of the more desirable vets is going to get you anywhere, because now you're talking about a much bigger number you got to match and trade. So unless you're getting, like now you're talking about like a $20-30 million player. So that's probably somebody really good. Is that why is the other team sending that player back? So I don't know that attaching Bagley to somebody else is the way off of Bagley. I think probably you're just kind of holding on to him until, he comes off the books. And I didn't mind like the swings at Bagley or Weissman, trying to again, you are in a rebuilding phase, taking some risks and seeing if you can rehab somebody or get the best out of somebody who hasn't quite figured it out somewhere else. Makes sense to me. Whether the contract for Bagley was justified is a different story. But again, in today's environment and today's under, this salary cap, 12 and a half isn't that onerous. It really isn't. So, I'm not looking to sacrifice any of my other assets just to get rid of Marvin Bagley's contract. I've been rambling, and so I've lost track of where the question actually began, but I think I answered.
So you actually, you were somewhat answered it, but it led me to like what my final question of this segment was going to be. Completely understand. I want to ask you this. I don't know if you've heard anything. I'm not asking you to share if you've heard anything. I just want to know your opinions on this. Tobias Harris has been a name that Pistons fans I've brought up a lot. That if you miss on your free agent guys, you can send out matching salaries with Philadelphia if they really want to get off of him, or if they want someone to absorb some more of his contract, and you can send back like a Bagley or something. You can send back. It depends what Philadelphia is trying to do. Before the Daryl Morey stuff came out that he's apparently asking for heaven and the moon, it's not feasible. But do you believe that Philadelphia actually is going to be? Do you think Tobias Harris is gettable? And do you think that it's actually going to be more of like a, hey, we want a lot of assets back? Or do you think Philadelphia could have potentially get to a point where they're like, okay, we just kind of want to get off of him and use this to split up the salaries in different ways?
The reports about what Daryl Morey was allegedly asking for are kind of funny because I don't like Daryl can drive a hard bargain, and Daryl is very aggressive, and there's a lot you could say about him, pros, cons, whatever. But I just the idea that he was really asking for like that kind of package, I can't even remember what all the names were. It was something preposterous. You don't say that unless you're being intentionally preposterous. I did not take that at face value. I took that as maybe if that conversation happened, it was something like somebody offered something ridiculous for Tobias Harris, and so his retort was, "Sure, fine, send me your three best players for Tobias Harris." Oh, that's right. It was like the Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, and whatever. Like that's not a serious thing. Like to me, if I had to guess, like there was something that provoked that was about like some other unreasonable ask in the first place, to which you come back with, I'm not giving Tobias Harris away. If you think he's so valuable, fine, send me your best young player and your center. I think Tobias Harris is gettable. I think the Sixers, because Morey has a reputation for being incredibly aggressive, and knowing that they haven't been good enough, they're probably bringing back Harden. So there's been a lot of money tied up in Tobias Harris. If they could parlay him into a couple impact players, then I think they would. But the Sixers have an absolute urgency to win now, and by win now, win at the highest level. They need to make the finals. They need to win a championship. I don't say we need to win a championship, but they need to at least make the finals. They need to make the conference finals. You have Joel Embiid in his prime, coming off an MVP season. So they're not going to give Tobias Harris away. They're not going to trade him just to trade him. They're going to do whatever they can to make sure they've got the right pieces next to Harden and Embiid to try to make a title run or multiple, period. So is he gettable? Sure. It depends on what's coming back. You're asking through the lens of the Pistons. I guess I'm trying to think, like, what would the Sixers want? And I'm not sure if the right pieces are there.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. We've been all hoping and praying that maybe a Bojan and Burks with something else maybe we could get it done, but doesn't look like maybe that's something that could happen. But
never know.
We'll see what happens. All right, so we're gonna come back. A very short segment coming up because we have ran a little long here, but these two segments are a little bit more important anyway. So we'll come back. We'll talk about the idea of older, younger guys playing in summer league. That whole sentence just doesn't feel right. We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, you guys got to hear from some of our sponsors. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. In efforts to not have this podcast run forever, we're just going to keep this a somewhat short segment here. Howard, the Pistons have James Wiseman, sounds like going to be playing in Summer League. They had Killian Hayes and Isaiah Stewart and Sadiq Bey playing last year in Summer League. And we've seen some young guys who maybe haven't figured it out in the league thus far that are a little bit older. Like when I say a little bit older, like 22, 23 kind of stuff. I'm playing in Summer League. And it really is about like fourth year guys, whatever, playing. And I've seen Pistons fans start to make some comments about Wiseman playing. And I've seen comments from other fan bases talking about their own guys that are maybe in their fourth year playing in the Summer League. Just giving my thoughts real quick. Now I want to get your thoughts and we can wrap up. I personally, if I was a professional basketball player, I'd be wanting to play basketball all the time. Basketball is fun. I love playing basketball. If I can go out and play basketball that simulates a 5-on-5, I don't want to say NBA atmosphere, but at least somewhat a professional atmosphere for 2 weeks, I'd go play. Like if I could do that, I'd go do that. And then I'd go play pickup the rest of the summer. I'd go, work on skills, whatever. Like I have no problem if young guys want to play in the summer league. I don't care if a team wants a 4th-year guy playing in the summer league. Like if it gives you reps and you have fun doing it, and you think it will make you better, I don't see a problem with it personally. Now I do understand there is somewhat of like an injury concern because guys in the summer league, it feels like they be trying to hurt each other sometimes. Like the guys who are trying to fight for a contract, it feels like sometimes they're a little too physical with things. So I get that perspective. But me personally, I don't see much. I don't see what's really wrong if like if a 4th-year guy like a James Wiseman, if they have him playing in the summer league. The dude needs reps. Who cares? I mean, it is what it is. What's your overall thinking on that? Do you disagree with me, or where do you stand with it?
First of all, if we've run long, it's because I have been rambling my ass off. So that's all on me. There is nothing. It's funny because it used to be the norm. This is my 26th. I just finished my 26th year covering this league, and summer league. It was not unusual for 2nd, 3rd year guys to be playing, and for even the rookies, even the high level rookies, to be playing. I don't know, more than one game. It's just more this generation, and just kind of the more we've had agents influencing things and player empowerment and just everything. Maybe it's generational. It feels like summer league has become more of this, like, oh, you dip your toe in and then you get out, and you know, that's it. Summer league is really important for certain kinds of players. Obviously, rookies and young players, free agents who are still trying to find a home and get do enough to get somebody to sign them to a 2-way deal or a training camp invite, whatever it may be. I don't know if you like your listeners may not recognize the name. You can go Google him. There's a guy named Bo Outlaw. Spent a lot of years in Orlando in particular. Bo Outlaw was playing summer league when he was still like 30. Like, I may be off by a year or two. Bo Outlaw played summer league all the time, and this is back before Vegas summer league even existed. There were multiple summer leagues. There was one in Long Beach, California. Boston had a summer league. I think Utah had theirs. There were like 3-4 summer leagues across the country, and then eventually the Vegas one was hatched, and that became the central place for the entire league. But back in the day, like, there were veterans who, if they were, just because, like you just said, Koo, they love to play. And it was an enjoyable environment. And if you're going to be playing pickup anyway, why not, make a few bucks? And also, if you're a free agent veteran, it was a way to kind of show what you're still capable of doing. James Wiseman, to bring it back to the Pistons, since I once again off on a tangent, James Wiseman's played 2 seasons and not 2 seasons. James Wiseman's he's played parts of 2 seasons, missed an entire season. He's a quote unquote 4th-year player. He's played 84 games. He's basically a rookie. Or is basically just coming off his rookie season. He has played 2 more games than 1 full regular season. That is the kind of player who had James Wiseman played all 82 of his rookie year, and then had already, and also had, played in a couple of playoff games. And then he came back the next year and he did summer league again. You'd say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, sure. He played 82 games. But he was like an 8-minute a game guy, 3rd string center, whatever. Like, if his context were a little bit different, instead of 84 games spread over 3 years, you wouldn't look at him as a 4th-year player who doesn't need to be in summer league. James Wiseman needs all the reps he can get right now. And he changed teams, and he's acclimating to a new franchise and expectations. And so, yeah, I have no problem with him being there. I mean, people can talk about injury risk, but these guys play pickup, at least the ones who truly love to play and spend their summers playing basketball. You can get injured in a pickup game probably more easily than in a summer league game, because at least a summer league game has professional referees and a format, and you've got your training staff there and everything else. Like, if a guy's going to be playing in the summer, I'd rather have him in summer league than just, running at the local gym. So I don't understand what anybody's objection to that would be. If the player is willing to do it, because, I think the first 2 years you can be quote unquote made to go to summer league. And I think past the first 2 years of your career, it's up to you to, if the team asks you, you can say yes or no. But I think young players who have not gotten a ton of reps, who need development still, it makes all the sense in the world. And I don't know why anybody would be objecting to that.
I completely agree with you. I think I haven't, again, if I was a professional basketball player, I'd be like Bo Outlaw. I'd be out there hooping every summer, 2 weeks.
Bo Outlaw had these killer goggles too, by the way. Like, he was the guy, he was like the first, like in the post Kareem era. Like he was the first big goggles guy I can remember. Him and like Horace Grant.
Is he related to Travis Outlaw?
I don't remember if Bo and Travis were related. And I of course remember Travis Outlaw too. I'm gonna do a quick basketball reference search while we're discussing this. They are in fact the only two outlaws in NBA history, according to Basketball Reference. And Basketball Reference always lists relatives if there's a relative who played, and on neither of their pages is the other guy listed. So
Fair enough.
I'm going to say they are not related, at least as far as Basketball Reference is concerned.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, well, we'll wrap it up there.
On that trivial note,
we'll wrap it up there. You guys got a little Travis Outlaw, Bo Outlaw shout outs here. If you guys are 2K players, you guys probably know them because like the same way I do from playing 2K. But thank you, Howard, for jumping on with us, man. We ran a little bit longer, but really good first two segments, and then we had some fun references here. So appreciate you guys listening, making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Hit that subscribe button at the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe and peace out.